now is Coming to the Forest, I believe. And here he is. Thank you, Christian. Zach, another. Zach, you had quite a good pitch too, which got I think the fourth highest number of votes. So discovered this little corner because I was searching for anyone who talked about Kierkegaard and knew what they were talking about. I don't really feel equipped to talk about Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is really complex.
Yeah.
He is super complex.
Oh yeah.
So I when people want to talk Kierkegaard with me, it's like I don't even want to pretend with Kierkegaard. So found your video which described Christian and Kierkegaard and couldn't stop watching. You work in Sweden, focused on equipping Christians to find purpose and transform culture. Very familiar with Tom Holland, young man working very directly with things you talked about. So, okay. Well, thank you, Zach.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, can you hear me well?
I hear you just fine.
Perfect. So yeah, thanks, Paul, for having me on. I was honestly just thinking about trying to get onto one of the randos like 2 days ago. I thought about it. And so then you posted this and it was perfect timing.
Good. And your pitch was great. You obviously got a lot of attention. People were interested. Tell me, you say you're from the Midwest. So tell me about the home you grew up in.
Yeah. So I'm from Minnesota. I come from a relatively small town in Minnesota. I was raised atheist, as it says there. So I was raised by a young single mother who had a really difficult teenage. She had a difficult life as a teenager, and at a young age she was kind of forced out of the house, and she had turned her back on God and turned her back on the church. She got into a lot of things that she shouldn't have, drugs, gang activity, stuff like that, and was pregnant with me at the age of 17. And so my story is very, very intricately tied to that, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So she had me when she was 18, left my biological father when I was just a year old. And so most of my childhood was just us two. We spent some time homeless that I actually don't remember anything of. So everything I know is just from stories from her. But so it would be moving from friends' couches and staying in kind of abandoned houses and in kind of bad parts of town, up until I was around like 5 or 6, and then we really got some stability. So she moved to the town where my grandparents were living in because my grandpa was very, very sick, and he was close to dying. So she was going to see them, and then after he passed away, we were going to move to Alaska and never see anyone ever again that we knew. So that was the plan, but that's not the way it worked out. She met my now stepdad, who was also an atheist. They were both very young. He was just coming out of the army, and he stepped in and he really filled a role as a dad in my life. So it doesn't feel like I was fatherless. I can remember a time before him, but he's really filled in that role very admirably, very, very well. So I just think of him as my dad. We're very, very close. They ended up getting married. But so they were atheists. I was raised atheist until I had a friend invite me to come to a church camp with him when I was 11 years old. My parents were fine with it because it's a week off. So then I get to go with, and there I met God. And it was, I can't explain it so much beyond I just at that point kind of had a tacit knowledge of God, that he was real, and that this Christian thing in some way was real. As an 11-year-old, I didn't know what that meant, but I started to go to church, and I started to go to church with my grandparents. My grandpa would live, he fought cancer for a long time, 7 years. And that last year that he was alive, I was going to church with him and my grandma, and they were Christians. They were praying very actively for all of their children to be able to meet God. And a year into me being a Christian, my grandpa's health was on a very, very steep decline. And there was just a lot of problems in the family around that time. But the night before he passed away, my mom had a dream where God came to her and revealed himself to her, who he is, and that he loves her, and that the things that have been difficult in her life were, it's just that he was there even through those things, and that this was going to be the last night that she had to be able to spend with her dad. And so she woke up and she didn't doubt it. She called all the family. She got everyone together. We all went to the hospital, and that was his last night, my grandpa's. But my grandpa, who had spent his years praying for his family to meet God, did get to see my mom, all of her siblings, all meet God. And they're all at different points in their relationships.
Yeah.
But that was my own testimony and my parents' testimony for how they met God. And it's a very key part of my life, because past that point, nothing was really the same. My dad was called into the ministry. So he went, after a couple of years, he started studying. He's gotten a master's in divinity now. He's working as a chaplain with the Army. My mom, she experienced so much healing. She is able to actually be around her family. She's able to be around her mom, who she really couldn't be around before because of her background. And she's, of course, she's not perfect, but she's in such a better place. And she's very actively involved in helping people who are in difficult situations, stuff like that. So God really transformed our entire lives. I'm not a Calvinist, but I believe very strongly that this was not something that any of us could have done.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how on earth did you get to Sweden?
Yeah. Interesting. Really, basically, it's in Minnesota, everyone is Scandinavian, basically. If your family background is any number of generations, you have some Scandinavian in you. So my family background, much of them moved from Sweden and Finland 150 years ago. So I've always had Scandinavia on my mind. The area of Minnesota that I'm in is very Lutheran culturally. Yeah. You're either a Lutheran, an atheist, or a charismatic, and that's kind of the assumption. And so Sweden's always been on my mind, and God had put the Scandinavian countries on my heart, I'm sure. After high school, I went into university, and I was studying, but I was studying something that I just didn't have very much passion for. And I don't know if you're familiar with the organization YWAM, Youth with a Mission.
Oh, yeah. There's a bunch of YWAMers around here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought I would do a DTS and then go right back to school. And when I thought about doing it, I didn't have any other thoughts besides Sweden. And I've always kind of worked strong off intuition. And so I just kind of knew Sweden. And I looked at all the bases there for YWAM to do the DTS. And I saw one and I was like, yeah, that's the one. And I applied, I got accepted, I went, and I felt at home. And I kind of knew I'm actually not going back to school right now. And so I went over, I did that. And that was a really transformative thing for me. You were talking in the last one about discipleship. Yeah. And you briefly mentioned it, but that's such an important part of my walk, is being able to, because I wasn't raised Christian, and so I didn't know all the stories, I didn't know all the things. So I was kind of like learning what it means to be a Christian as I went. And so that process of discipleship, learning from people who have lived the faith for a long time and know what it's about, helping me along, that was a really big thing for me. So that's how I'm in Sweden. I stayed there, I'm working there, and yeah.
So one of our most famous YWAMers is Jess in the corner. I don't know if he always talks about the book of Job.
I love the book of Job.
So if you if you go to Grail Country or on my channel, check the back catalog. Jess also has his own channel. But there are a bunch of YWAMers. Youth with a Mission. That's what YWAM stands for. One person said youth without money, without any money.
That's also true.
Yeah. Kansas City Kansas City Job Jess. That's right. So you might want to look him out. So tell me what you're doing in Sweden.
Yeah, a lot generally, but the thing that sticks out the most, we have something at our base called a School of Biblical Worldview, and that's what I'm working with right now. And the point is based. So I really strongly prescribe to the idea that a religion is not this kind of whole set of propositions that you just have to believe, and then that's now you're a Christian, now you're this. But it's much more about the way that you live your life, and kind of what you keep talking about this with Jordan Peterson. So I really agree with that. And so an important part of being a Christian is understanding the way that the Bible and Christianity actually affects your life. And beyond just like vote red or vote blue or whatever it is. So that's really the focus of the school. It's to look at what the Bible says and how it affects, every aspect of our life, vocationally, existentially, in terms of the Great Commission and stuff like that. I would synthesize it in that way. So that's what I'm working with right now. And obviously your channel is a great wealth of resource for me with that.
Well, if you come late, there's a huge back catalog. So there's a ton of stuff. Well, what have you're fairly late to this little game. What have your impressions been by it, and why? I mean, you didn't, the common story is Jordan Peterson, Peugeot, Vervaeke, Vanderklay. That's the common story, but you came through Kierkegaard. So what caught your attention about what's going on here in this little corner?
So like I said, I found that video of yours, and I also like to listen to Jordan B. Cooper a lot. And so I'm sure the algorithm saw some connection there. I would describe myself as a bit of a pietist Lutheran in some way. I come from a Lutheran culture, but I am so shaped by the charismatic evangelical environment that I really met God in. And I've seen too much of God in this kind of charismatic environment to just throw it away. I just can't, I can't just go to some like confessional box kind of out of that. I've just experienced too much. But so I like Jordan B. Cooper a lot. And so I saw that you had an interview with him and Vervaeke also. And I noticed that when I just looked at your channel, because it's kind of rare for people to talk about Kierkegaard specifically. And I don't want to focus too much on that, but to talk about Kierkegaard without kind of confusing what he is saying with what his, I can't remember the word, his pseudonyms are saying kind of. So many people, it's just like, he says you're either this or this and all those things. And they can't really separate the pseudonyms from the person. And so I found your video and I was thinking, okay, this guy seems to know what he's talking about, but I really have no idea what he was about. And so I did a big deep dive, and just, you had a lot of really interesting looking videos. And I was into Jordan Peterson a little bit back in 2018. I didn't watch so much, but I used to read a lot of Solzhenitsyn, and he talked about Solzhenitsyn a lot and Dostoevsky, and I love them. And so I was following along for that, but I never got so into the clean your room stuff. But so I just saw that you were talking about Jordan Peterson and Kierkegaard, and those things were interesting enough for me to give a listen to. And everything you talk about really captured me.
Okay. What, now you've lived in Sweden for 5 years as, someone who didn't grow up there. And I know, having been a foreign missionary, that kind of cultural movement affords you a certain kind of knowledge. You can in some ways see America through different eyes because you've now lived out, so you can see the Swedes through different eyes. What have you learned in this cultural interchange? What have you picked up? Or how has that affected you?
I think the number one thing that it's affected me in is, and I'll be processing this as I'm talking, but it very much being able to see America from an outside perspective and understand that there's a wide variety of what a Christian actually can believe. And so becoming a Christian as a preteen in a very evangelical church, I kind of grew up with a bit of the assumption that you have to be like a Ronald Reagan type vote red, small government guy. Otherwise you're not a Christian. And I wasn't really fully convinced by that. And so I think one of the biggest things for me was being able to go to a different culture and a different context and see the way that the church operates in that culture and that context, and how alive it is. Because Youth with a Mission is very international.
Yes.
I spent a lot of time with Swedes, but I've spent a lot of time with Ethiopians and South Americans and Koreans and everything. And so that was kind of maybe one of the biggest things for me, actually, is seeing the richness of culture being able to unite around something like the gospel, and understanding that there's a lot of things that aren't actually gospel truth in that way that we kind of take to be. So that was one of the biggest things. And I just think it affords so much possibility to see your culture sort of from an outside perspective. Because I learned Swedish, and so I see all the Swedish media. I can read everything that Swedes write about America, the way that they talk. And so I can see it sort of from that inside perspective. And I think that just helps me to understand my own background better.
Okay. Well, we've only got 4 minutes left, and I've pestered you. Anything you want to ask me about, or anything you wanted to say?
Ooh, I wasn't prepared for that, because I know you like to talk about people's stories, so I was ready with that. But
another bit of your story you want to share? I mean, anything. I want to give you.
No. I don't have anything specific else like that. But let me just think for a second. So one thing that I think is really interesting is that you seem to be very willing and able to listen to people of any kind of a background, any kind of perspective. You have people on your channel who are Orthodox, Catholic, everything. And yet you're also a confessional Dutch Reformed pastor, and you're able to have these conversations, and you're able to kind of accept people into this space and talk through it all. How do you kind of do that in a good way? That's quite a task. There's a lot there. And how do you have a conversation with someone, a meaningful conversation, when you don't even necessarily have the same fundamental view of the world?
I don't know. One of the reasons my wife married me, my wife's brother he was a diesel mechanic. He was a truck driver. He was a very different person than at least who my wife saw me to be when we first met. And she was surprised how quickly I could kind of get into his world and relate to him and build a connection with him. I think I grew this by virtue of who my father was, because my father could do this, and his father could do this. So this generation of pastors. I think it also helped that I grew up in northern New Jersey, in an area which was just multi everything, and so a predominantly African American community. So I've always lived. I sort of grew up in a space where I was culture shifting all the time.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. So I love meeting new people and sort of carving out a little mapping of them in my brain and try to think through that map and get to know them. And then talking to them is sort of like, okay, I quickly get a little map of them. And now when I have a conversation, I want to try out and see I get the map right. So then I keep correcting that map. So it's all this kind of stuff. So I really enjoy doing that. So
yeah,
fun.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. And then of course the internet and YouTube, I didn't really discover YouTube. I didn't discover much of what YouTube was until Jordan Peterson. And then things started to click. And then when I started making videos and stuff starts coming the other way in YouTube, and then we start having conversations, and then this whole network of conversations begins to develop. That really excited me, because because again, I'm not gonna, like, we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
I don't have enough time to spend with you that you deserve. But the thought that, well, and that's why I did this thing. Now, all kinds of people are going to see this, and some people are going to say, I want him on my channel. So that has happened with a number of people. Even if I just kind of highlight them on Twitter or on my channel, then some of the other channels pick up. And as a pastor, that's the way churches knit themselves together. So
yeah.
Well, Zach, we are out of time, but I thank you so much for writing a great pitch.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
You can go email.
Okay.
I'll say it quickly. So ZMWHOAMI@gmail.com.
Okay, there it is. So if anybody wants to get Zach on and continue this story, or at least connect him with Jess, well, there will be. So thank you much, Zach.
No, thank you.